Welcome to When Work Works, the podcast that helps leaders navigate the fast-changing world of work. I'm Julie Devlin, and today we're talking about how payroll has officially outgrown the back office. According to the latest KPMG and UKG Executive Global Payroll Survey, it's now a strategic enabler, and it's on par with HR and finance. So to unpack the data and what it means for global leaders, I am excited to be joined by Dimitris Papageorgiou from KPMG. Demetrius, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So before we get into the survey, this podcast is called When Work Works. So to start, can you fill in the blank for me? Work works when?
Work works when you don't have to think about your paycheck, when you don't have to think about your HR data, when the CFO doesn't have to concern themselves with your compliance, when the CHRO doesn't have to concern themselves with labor regulations, and the systems are doing what you expect of them to be doing, your people are doing what they expect of them to be doing, and they're focusing on making your business run.
That's amazing. Yes, work works when we do all of those things for sure. Thank you so much for that. So tell me, how long have you been at KPMG, and tell us a little bit about KPMG.
I'm coming up to my 4th year anniversary with KPMG. I have been in the space for a little over 25 years, split in almost equal parts between consulting and industry. So I actually ran payroll and HR operations in my past. UKG has been my home, and given the vision that we have around this particular space and the investment that we have made.
It's very nice. And your title at KPMG?
I'm a partner amongst the many partners, but I lead the global payroll and workforce management offering. So I decide how we go to market, what we bring to our clients, and who we align with, like UKG.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about the survey. Why is it important to get the results from this survey in this day and age?
Listening to what others have to say about how they perceive our services or what they feel is an issue or an area of concern for them in their day-to-day operations has always been a good guiding post in terms of what we need to be solving for. We haven't done one with KPMG, so we thought that an inaugural survey on this particular topic, given that we are still solving problems that we have encountered, I would say, in the last 10, 15 years, they're still persistent. We felt it would be good to go back to the market and actually hear from VPs and above, because that's only who we surveyed, what their take was on why do we still have these problems and how can we solve them.
It's very important. And when we think about payroll, and payroll is in a way having a moment in the spotlight. Would you agree with that?
100%. The payroll has had a moment in my spotlight my entire life. But indeed, we are, I think, at a juncture point right now where people are beginning to realize that payroll is not just a tactical, transactional type of activity that happens in the back office, but it's a strategic function because it holds a lot of insights, a lot of data that the organization can leverage, as well as represent probably one of the largest, if not the largest, operating expense an organization has.
Yeah, I've seen that too in my travels and the conferences I go to. Payroll is being looked at as that strategic function finally. And I think it's so critically important because, as you mentioned, this data that payroll owns, and almost that they can tell the story of what's going on within the organization from a financial perspective. And that can affect all areas of the organization.
Yeah, payroll is the lowest common denominator that any organization has. Not everybody has a laptop. You may have janitorial, crew as part of your organization that doesn't need to log into a laptop, or they may not have a Active Directory email, but everybody gets paid. So payroll is truly the lowest common denominator.
So the survey found that 92% claim to have a global payroll strategy, but challenges like compliance and data accuracy are still there. In your view, where is that disconnect happening between the strategic piece and the execution piece? And what can leaders do to maybe bridge that gap?
I think often there is an aspiration or a desire to have a 3-5 year roadmap of what they want to do. But quite honestly, we're seeing from clients that they don't have the means nor the ability to elaborate the vision to their management in order to get the appropriate funding or the follow through in terms of execution. So strategy may be there, but we don't necessarily see the reality commensurate that.
In your view, if you could give any advice to someone who's just getting started on a strategy, where should folks start there?
first understanding what you're solving for. In order to have a strategy, you must be solving for something. You're looking for agility because you're an acquisitive organization. Through M&A, you're growing, you're expanding. You may want to be reducing costs. You maybe want to improve data. There may be different drivers why you need a strategy on a go-forward basis. But most of the times we're finding that many are trying to cater to that strategy thesis with not a clear line of sight as to what they want to accomplish and measurables as to how they're going to get there.
Right. I love that. So it's almost like, and I use this quote a lot, begin with the end in mind. So what are you trying to solve for? And if you understand what it is you're trying to solve for, then as you go forward, you're able to make decisions that don't prevent you from reaching that goal. So organizations, according to the study, are losing 2 to 4% of total labor spend to inefficiencies and errors. And what do you think, in your view, is actually behind that leakage? And why do things keep slipping through the cracks?
We define leakage in two ways, intentional and unintentional leakage. Intentional leakage is when an organization knows that they're overspending on something, but a manager or an executive made a decision to let that go. And I'll give you an example. Somebody receives a sign-on bonus. They have to stay for 3 months with the organization. They quit after 2.5 months, but they were a nice person, and we decide they're going to keep it because we don't want to claw it back. That is intentional leakage. Unintentional leakage is when a mistake happens, when things are now known that are actually exiting like an incorrect overtime pay or something of that nature. The 2 to 4%, though, is validated, and everybody that has data on this, everybody agrees that it's somewhere between 1.5 to 5. We feel at KPMG that 2 to 4 is the right range based on what we have found in the market. Having said that, because the cost is realized in the business and not a specific cost center, it's distributed across the organization, nobody really understands the magnitude of it and how to capture it.
In your experience, do you find that most payroll organizations actually track KPIs?
They track KPIs. The question is, are they tracking the right KPIs?
What would the right ones be?
Well, they would have to hire us for that. But one of the KPIs that we see often in the market is accuracy of payroll. If I have 99.8% accuracy in payroll, but I have 100,000 employees, that implies that 200 employees didn't get paid correctly. That's 200 too many. So that's why I think the KPIs always don't tell the truth as to what you need to focus. Because if that 200 employees that had a problem are part of a specific location, a specific site, then it's a big problem. It's different if it's across your entire population versus one specific site.
Yeah, which kind of leads to another conversation there about how payroll leakage and things like that sort of impact trust and retention and reputation.
There was a quote that I read once that said, if you cannot do payroll for your business, meaning you cannot pay your employees, you shouldn't be in business. Well, I would add to that, if you cannot do quality payroll in your business, it's probably the same kind of statement. So I think it's a covenant of trust. An employee expects that I'm going to show up, I'm going to do what you're asking me to do, but on Friday, I'm going to get what I deserve. And if that is not coming through, it is always a lack of confidence in the ability of the organization to see you and reward you.
Yeah, and what happens then is those folks are going to tell their friends how terrible it is to work at your organization. So it's a negative connotation just with one wrong paycheck. At UKG, we did a study several years back on the effects of if someone gets just 2 wrong paychecks, then they're more prone to leave the organization immediately. And I think that makes sense, right? Because people don't like when you mess with their money.
The issue with that is the bad news actually tend to propagate much faster than good news. And nobody ever calls their friends and say that I got my paycheck right. But they will definitely call their friends and say that they got their paycheck wrong.
Or maybe they get paid wrong so often that when they get paid correctly.
Maybe they do.
Yeah, but that's not where we're going either. So I want to switch gears just a little bit and ask you about one of the hot topics of the day, and maybe even of the year or the past several years, and that's AI in payroll. What, in your opinion, separates real transformation from the overhyped pilots and that kind of thing? Have you seen AI in payroll working?
There is definitely areas where we see opportunity for AI. Quite honestly, I haven't necessarily seen that yet in practice. There is a lot of, I would say, early type of investment or thinking in the space. Where I do see an immediate application is the customer service or the call center, I would say, of any payroll interaction. In addition to that, I think the computational power that comes with generative AI in terms of being able to aggregate data, synthesize views, and come back with opinions on that data is something that we definitely have applications for. But as I said previously, we haven't necessarily seen that be done consistently and universally by any client.
So would you say that we're on our way?
You can have a thoroughbred, but if you don't actually train it to race,
Yeah.
it will still remain a thoroughbred that it's in the stable. So AI has the capability, having the right people to actually have the vision of how to utilize it and put it to use is what we haven't necessarily been in place yet. I do think we're going to have advancements in that space in the next 3 to 5 years. And I do think that it's going to change the service delivery model in many ways. It's not going to be, though, as impactful or as exclusive of people as some have envisioned.
The AI conversation to me is just, it's so broad and there's so much hype versus reality. I'm sort of waiting for that where we hear from organizations, this is what's working, this is what's not working, and this is what everybody should be doing, right? But there's so much nuance to it, and organizations are sort of putting AI band-aids on things, but they're not having a full strategy, sort of like we talked about earlier. So let me ask, if you had a minute with every CHRO or CFO listening to our discussion, what's one thing you'd tell them to stop doing and start doing when it comes to payroll strategy?
Don't take things on face value. Probe a little further, probe on the KPIs, probe on the SLAs, and understand what is truly happening in that operation. In most cases, public companies certified through SOX that they know what's going on in payroll. And I can tell based on my experience that that is not a statement that I would make lightly, given what we know of the payroll affairs of many organizations. So understanding what is going on, having a good command and control center, being able to actually properly oversee the function is something that we see consistently missing. So my recommendation to any CHRO and CFO would be establish a command and control center, have the right talent in it, give them a path for growth, and then things will happen.
And payroll needs to have a strategic seat at the proverbial table, correct?
Well, if we wanted to create a little controversy today, I would say that I wouldn't be talking to them because I would think that payroll is now an independent C-suite organization that combines contingent labor, payroll, and WFM, workforce management, in a newly formed function that is now transacting the largest operating expense that an organization has, which is labor.
Yes. Are you seeing any organizations lean into a CPO role, Chief Payroll Officer role? Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it yet, although there are initiatives in the market towards a CPO. I will say that personally, I believe that the word payroll has negative connotation. So at KPMG, we actually are advocating for a Chief Labor Management Officer. And that's why I said contingent labor would have to be under that umbrella. So it's basically anybody that provides services to an organization as talent is captured under that title in terms of remuneration.
It's almost like we're thinking a little bit differently about payroll function within our organization, where it sits, right? Who it reports to, also helping payroll folks learn the skills that they need to work in this new environment with AI and all of the tools.
Based on the survey findings, we see some of the same issues exist as they did 10 and 15 years ago. Is payroll is by default a mid-manager level organization. Individuals that want to become a CHRO will not stay in payroll. Individuals that want to become a CFO will not stay in payroll. They'll go into some different area, FP&A or talent, in order to become a CHRO. So the most talented individuals will not stay in payroll because they will cap at a VP or an SVP level role. So having the path for them to ascend into a C-suite will retain some of the talent that has been deprived of this space.
Yeah, it's so important as we look at the future of work and actually the current state of work to really lean into the knowledge and all the information that payroll holds. This has been an amazing conversation. Is there anything else that you want to say about the survey?
We intentionally kept the survey at an executive level. So we surveyed 319 companies around the globe, VP levels and above. And the reason was because we didn't want to hear from the individuals that necessarily transact payroll on the day-to-day basis, but for the individuals that manage payroll. And that's why we came out with that thesis that this is the time for us to start thinking about a new function. The same way we created procurement a few years ago, Procurement used to be under finance, a sub-function, and now has a chief procurement officer. I think it's time for the chief labor management officer.
Great. And in the show notes, we'll put where folks can find the survey and more information about the survey.
Absolutely.
And also how they can contact you as well. So we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. So we like to end our podcast with some real hard-hitting questions, Demetrius. Are you ready for these?
I am.
All right. Demetrius, what is one book that you always recommend?
Pillars of the Earth from Ken Fowler.
What was your first job?
First job was at a professional employee organization. It was a tri-state, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. I spent 5 years there learning everything about payroll, HR, and finance, quite honestly, because we're doing back office outsourcing.
What is one thing that listeners would be surprised to learn about you?
I love to play tennis.
Ah,
I love anything tennis related, quite honestly. And sometimes with work, we actually had the opportunity to go to the Queen's Club this year while we were serving a client in the UK. And I went to the US Open in New York. So I try to see what is going on with tennis. And if there's a tournament in town, I'll try to snake in there.
fantastic. Maybe we'll see you in Wimbledon someday.
Sounds great.
Yeah. All right. Well, Demetrius, thank you so much for joining us and helping us reimagine what payroll can be. And when it moves from a back office process to that strategic function, that powerhouse that drives trust and compliance and performance across the enterprise, that's when payroll really becomes more impactful. So to our listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to When Work Works. If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know by leaving us a rating and a review. Until next time, keep building workplaces that work. Thank you, Demetrius.
Thank you.